right, there we go. I am Tom Ballard, the Groundwater Guy, and welcome to Groundwater Talk Live. We are here on May 26, 2022, and we're going to talk today. We're going to talk about drought actions and what's going on in the drought in the West. We're going to talk a little bit about PFAS, some good news on the PFAS front as far as treatment goes. And we're going to talk about a few other things, some microplastics news that seems to be a hot topic out there that people are interested in. And then we got a few other things we're going to talk about too, just to kind of, do a roundup of some of the news that I think is significant out there that may affect you folks. So let's dive in. Before we get going, if you guys can just drop a comment in the chat, say hi, whatever you want. If you're watching this on a recording, if you could, just post a like or a share or whatever, a comment. I appreciate it. It helps the algorithm get the word out so we can continue to grow the channel a little bit. We're starting to get some more viewers, so and people joining the channel. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate all of you who tune in and watch this, and hopefully we'll continue to bring you some valuable information here. I'm also always interested in hearing from everybody about what you want to hear about. So as we're looking for topics or people to interview, I'm always interested in hearing that from folks on that. So, okay, so let's dive in here for our first topic of the day, and that's really going to be what's going on in the drought in California and the rest of the West. Obviously, California is not the only part of the U.S. that's affected by the drought. So let me just shift here so I'm in my camera. So we're gonna look at that and start looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor and some of the actions that are taking place in California and how it's affecting drilling permits and other things going on. So that's what we're going to start with here. So here is the U.S. Drought Monitor, and this basically, this new map was just released today, just this morning, as a matter of fact. So you can see that we got some pretty severe drought. If you look down below, we shift this down just a little bit here so you can see the intensity impacts here. We have some pretty good sections of Texas, New Mexico, Nevada, California, and even up into Washington that are in the exceptional drought category. And then you have some big swaths of the West that are in the extreme drought category. So we can see that this is really certainly affecting things, and certainly the water supply is one of those things. Well, how much groundwater there is. Surface water deliveries in California, I know, are really reduced because there's just not much water. We'll look at some of the other patterns here as well. But this the U.S. Drought Monitor here is droughtmonitor.unl.edu, and that's a good place to go to see the current. You can see different parts of the country and download data and if you're really looking at the trends out there, this is really a great monitor. But this just captures and shows really how severe it is. And no, most people hear about California and the drought going on out there, but don't realize how severely Texas is actually affected with the drought here too. So, and we're also seeing some long-term effects up here in the high plains. That is affecting the wheat crop, and we're talking, this stuff all fits together. California, they've had to fallow acreage. We're looking at the high plains where they had some rain earlier this year that didn't let them get in and plant the wheat. Now we're seeing a drought conditions developing up there that is going to affect the wheat harvest too. So we're not looking at a really good wheat harvest, given what's going on in Europe and the Ukraine. We're going to see a lot of depleted wheat availability out there. So there will be, in certain parts of the world, there are going to be food shortages. And in the U.S., we're looking at probably reduced yields from some areas as far as the wheat crop goes. U.S. will probably be okay as far as wheat and food goes, but there's going to be some parts of the world where we might normally have food to export to that might not get affected. So it all comes home to roost on the drought conditions, or that's a big factor in the food shortages that we're probably going to be seeing later in the year. We also have supply chain shortages, of course, but the drought plays a big role here, and um, we could look at worldwide conditions as well. But really, what it comes down to is war plus drought. Um, equals famine. It's really what it eventually comes down to. But certainly in the U.S., we're going to see decreased wheat yields, probably corn yields, and even in California, a lot of the veggies and stuff. The prices are certainly going to go up. We may see a lot of stuff coming in from South America, but wheat, maybe not so much. We're definitely going to see a worldwide wheat shortage, and that plays into the drought. So let's look at a comparison. This is on the right-hand side here. This is the conditions as of January 4th, 2022. And so at the beginning of the year, you can see we still had some drought, some severe drought, even down into California in the Central Valley area there, but into Washington and up into Montana, and some bad areas in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Nevada. But as we've gone along here, this situation has only gotten worse, and so on the left-hand side here, we can see the current drought map. And for comparison, January 4th, you can actually go through on this, and we can look and see, even what it was at the beginning of May. So even then, it not as severe, and so the drought is continuing to spread and grow, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of relief in sight. Here is a time series map, and this really looks at going back to 2000 all the way to the present here. And so this is California in particular. So you can see periods of drought here. California had a very severe drought from 2014 through 2017, so a 3-year drought period. A little bit of relief here between 2017 and 2020, and then 2020 back into the drought here. And you can see we're getting close to the magnitude, probably not quite as bad as it was here yet, and certainly not over the same time frame, because we can see this was almost a continuous, a very severe drought condition. We're seeing it bounce around a little bit here, but certainly what happens is we've depleted our stores, and really, quite frankly, not a lot has been done, or certainly not enough has been done to deal with drought conditions in California. We can look at some other states here, Texas, for instance. Let's scroll down here. You can see what's going on in Texas. Texas kind of comes and goes. They got some droughts. So they were back in 2011, 2012. They had a pretty severe drought, but then it bounced around a little bit, and now, so you can see they're pretty cyclical in Texas. Now we go to my state, Tennessee, and we can see that we had a drought for about a 6-month, pretty severe drought back in 2000, the end of 2007. A little bit in 2017, but really we're doing pretty good this year for rainfall. So just comparing some different parts of the country here to California, and if we look at overall the national trends for continental U.S., we can see that we do get some cycles here. The current one is actually pretty sustained if you look at the U.S. as a total as far as trends go. But we can see that from about 2011 on, where California really got their really severe drought, we can see that we've had at least some parts of the country that are really into extreme drought conditions, and then now we're really back into that now. So we're seeing a definite drought cycle. So, but you can see it is it is somewhat cyclical. I think we could. I don't know if this can go back. We can actually take and plot the data back a ways and really see how cyclical this is. But you get an idea that it kind of bounces around a little bit here. So why that is, let's look at percent of normal rainfall here. This is uh, percent based on the past 30 and 90 days, updated daily from the Climate Prediction Center. So here is our 30-day accumulated precipitation, and you can see that we have a big swath of the southwest going down into Mexico where we're down below 10% of normal. So this is obviously a real definite predictor of drought, obviously, because if you're not getting any rainfall, you're going to get drought conditions, and it's all directly related to the precipitation. So we do have some above average areas up into Canada, but for the most part, the U.S., except a little bit right in Oklahoma, really is well below their their normal precipitation levels. So this is a cause for concern because we're not really seeing these conditions turn around as we move into the summer months. Here's kind of a longer term look at things. This is, I believe I got this set on last 90 days. So you can see this is actually inches of precipitation. So you can see the southeast has actually gotten a fair amount of rain. And the Pacific Northwest, believe it or not, has gotten a fair amount of rain. But we look down in the southwestern U.S., and they're doing pretty poorly. They're down in the blue, which is at the bottom of the scale, and so really not much rain at all down there. So that's pretty consistent with our last 30 days. So that's what's happening with the drought in the U.S. Here is so let's move on here and really look and see what's going on in California. This is from Zero Hedge, but which is something of a I call it doom porn, but it's they have a lot of yeah, exactly what I call it there. So kind of looking at the worst possible situation, but this is just showing up in more news that normally is related to financial information. That's what Zero Hedge is all about is financial information and doom and gloom on that front. But this is making it into the news here that Governor Newsom is trying to take more aggressive actions and they had a closed meeting. And they're really pushing for the emergency drought declaration that they did in March. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too, how that is coming down and some of the effects we're seeing from that. And that's really the basis of this, but they're really trying to do more to conserve. And part of the issue is people get tired of conserving, and they tend to backslide, and we've seen that California's conservation levels have, especially in Southern California and the Los Angeles areas, they're actually up 3% year over year in the LA area. So, which tells me that people are kind of getting tired of restricting and not being able to water their lawns, and they're kind of sneaking things and we may just be moving into another multi-year severe drought, so they need to do better than that. So it's what can the government do? My contention, as always, and you've probably, if you've been on here, you've heard me say it, is that the government tends to take a very short-term viewpoint on things, and it's usually centered around the next election cycle, so getting people reelected, and that's their planning horizon, which is usually about 2 years. That's not long enough for water planning. We do see with the advent of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that they're taking a little bit longer term look, but some of these emergency things, when you go into drought, it's they they run around, they do a lot of things and do emergency orders, and then when the drought quits, they don't sustain their planning and for the long term, and it goes away until they get caught by surprise by the next drought. So I'm pretty critical of government and how they handle these things in this situation. It's not just the water side. That's where I happen to work, but I'm pretty critical of the government and in their planning horizons. It's just you could do a lot more with a lot longer range planning, but if you're seeking reelection every 2 years, then or every 4 years, then that's your planning horizon. It's what can help me get reelected, and not the long term stuff 20 years from now. And that's really what we need for this. So. Sigma was a step in the right direction. I think it's got some issues, but it's a step in the right direction because it's a longer term process. It's just that when you go into drought, the short term running around emergency orders and stuff just it's chaotic. It's not sustainable, and people tend to ignore it if it's voluntary restrictions. So there needs to be better long-term planning is really what it comes down to, and it needs to be a sustained process. And I say that like the Water Board and Department of Water Resources probably claim that they're doing this long-term planning, but my contention would be that they're not doing enough, and it's driven by politics, and and therein lies the problem. So there we go. So that's our first story here. Um, uh, the point here is the first 3 years of the month were the driest in the state's recorded history. So that is significant, and that could be a sign we're entering into another longer term drought period like we had a few years ago, and that would not be good because California really hasn't recovered yet from that long term drought a few years ago, and now we're moving right back into the situation. All right, so this is kind of an official release from the governor that he convened a summit with local water leaders, urging a more aggressive response to the ongoing drought. This was a closed meeting, so all we get is the official pronouncement on what went on. Um, and what they say is after the last drought, local water agency pushed for greater flexibility in water conservation and drought response based on regional needs and water supplies, and not a one-size-fits-all solution for the state. Um, they're saying that they've embraced that. I'm not really seeing that, but it could be. You're seeing some hints of that, but generally it tends to be a pronouncement that's a statewide thing, and really regional solutions are the way to go. And part of it should be within the wheelhouse of the sustainability agencies that manage the different basins, but a lot of those plans under Sigma are still undergoing revision and approval, and so there's not a lot of teeth in that governance right now. So eventually, we're going to see every medium and high priority basin regulated as if it was adjudicated under the sustainable groundwater agencies, so that's part of that. He's talking about communications and all that stuff, and all that's well and good. People get beat over the head, and you beat them over the head long enough with this stuff, voluntary stuff, and they start ignoring it, watering their lawns, hosing off their sidewalks, washing their car. It gets to the point where they just ignore it. So you can plead, you can beg, you can cajole, but until you have something with some teeth, you're really not going to do much. So in July of last year, they were talking about a voluntary 15% reduction. The state failed to meet that. Like I said, some areas of the state are actually showing an increase. Shame on you, Los Angeles. But it's so they came out this year with with the in March with the drought order, the executive order, emergency order on the drought that I'll talk about again. I've talked about it in a few different shows. I'll talk about it again here as how some of that stuff is playing out. Um, so they're looking at throwing some money at it, investing $2 billion in drought response. Um, so education for a lot of it is for education and communication. Uh, it's that's all well and good, but it's not like most people don't know we're in the drought and we need to conserve. So there's a limit to what education and communication does for people. Um, the water resilience portfolio probably a better use of the time. Um, they need to do some long term things to build water resilience, and but they've done. I mean, we're talking about taking shorter showers and limiting outdoor watering, all well and good, but we just had some stupid things going on. Stupid, in my opinion, and very stupid, in my opinion, is the Coastal Commission just denied the permitting for a new desalination plant on the coast, and the California Coastal Commission tends to be very heavily environmentalist oriented, and they just are very difficult to get anything through. And so after years and millions of dollars, this desalination plant that could definitely be used in drought situations was denied. So that is probably the death of any significant desalination plants along the coast. So with reduced surface water deliveries, with depleted groundwater, well, where do you go? I mean, obviously conservation is the only thing, but you can only conserve so far. Desalination to me looked like it's not cheap to do desalination, but when there's no water, that's what you need to do. So I call that a very stupid decision. They had their reasons for denying it, but it's dumb, and it's going to impact California because I don't see anybody investing a lot of money in trying to permit desalination plants now with this recent decision. So there you go. This is basically just another story from the Los Angeles Times. It basically covers the same ground. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. I'm going to go back here to we're going to look at the drought protection order. Had some provisions in here that, and I'm going to talk about this. We did a show where we unpacked this whole thing, and so I'm not going to go into great detail other than to say there's two sections in here that we're really going to talk about here because we're seeing some action on that. Section 9 is really about permitting new wells, and this was really oriented towards agricultural wells in medium or high priority basins. And the first section requires written verification from a groundwater sustainability agency. Those agencies created under SGMA to approve the well. And the second section, which is a little more significant, there's no new permits for ag wells for alteration of an existing well or a new well that does not that is not shown that it's not likely. You need to show that it's not likely to interfere with a nearby existing well, not defined, and not likely to cause subsidence. Now, the first one, the interference, that's a little easier to define, although it's what are they considering significant interference? A lot of times we see 5 feet, 2 feet, within 1,000 feet, but the numbers are kind of all over the board. How do you determine that you're putting in a new well is not likely to cause subsidence without doing some substantial groundwater modeling? This is a more challenging situation. There's no procedures out there. I think some counties are working on it, but the point is this was originally designed to apply to agricultural wells in the executive order here. We are now seeing places like Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, Kern County, and other counties. I'm starting to hear from people as I talk to people are just basically not issuing new well permits for anything, municipal wells, agricultural wells, whatever. You might still be able to get a domestic well because those fly under the radar here, but so we are seeing this. We're also seeing some of these counties coming out and saying what defines interference. 2 feet or 5 feet within 1,000, you need to identify any wells within 1,000 feet. And if you can show that you have more than 2 or 5 feet of drawdown that you're causing in those wells, that's considered significant interference. So nobody to date has really come up with a good model for saying, okay, I'm going to put in this well and it's going to cause so much subsidence. That's really very challenging to do. So what we're seeing is some hydrogeologists basically just stamping some reports and saying, yeah, we don't think it's going to happen. Well, the problem is people are hesitant to do that because there's liability attached with that. If there's subsidence in an area and you got a new well, and whether you can prove the well caused the subsidence or not, which is difficult to do at best, you still can have some legal liability here. And I think there's a lot of hydrogeologists out there that are going to have trouble stamping a report like that. I know I would. I would want to have some more concrete guidance. So this is a challenge. And for the counties that are basically have just quit issuing well permits, period, we're seeing some issues with that. Is people are saying, we need the water, and so the counties are saying, okay, well, if you come to us with a certified hydrogeologist report that indicates you've satisfied the conditions under B, and we're outside a medium or a high priority basin, so we don't need to get the GSA involved, then we will look at it and possibly approve your permit. That's going to add time and cost, and we're seeing more and more of these counties looking at having a report stamped by a hydrogeologist that will be necessary to get the well permit. This is going to add time and expense, obviously. So that's one thing we're seeing here. So, and it seems to be growing. I'm getting more reports of different counties saying, yeah, we're just applying this to all wells now. So that was not the intent of the executive order, but it's how it's coming down. Another section in the report is section 2, I believe, or 3 actually. There is in the water code, there is a section on dealing with annual supply and demand assessments by different water districts, and that urban water suppliers, and that's defined in the code, that they have at a minimum shortage response actions, and there are certain levels there. A lot of this is voluntary, and it's just in play. Well, it's not voluntary, but it's required to be there and to put in place if under certain trigger conditions. This executive order is basically requesting that the State Water Resources Control Board adopt emergency regulations that require people to implement their shortage response actions, at least level 2, which is for shortage of up to 20%. So that's triggering some different actions. If I can go back here to we're seeing some different. This happens to be Yorba Linda Water Agency. I picked this up on shout out to those guys. Done some work for them in the past. This goes back to this is actually off a LinkedIn posting they did. They're taking some action to kind of get ahead of the curve here. So they're actually they had a board meeting here to discuss their response to the governor's executive order and the State Water Resources draft water shortage mandate that was directed under that order. And so They were discussing this on May 10th. I have not followed up to see if they've actually implemented this, but they've already got their response actions together. So they're getting ahead of the curve here and initiating those actions. I haven't seen. I think a lot of other water districts are probably at least looking at this. Obviously, it would be to their best advantage too. But I think we're going to see more of this. Yorba Linda is actually getting out in front of it and taking some aggressive actions here, and that's important. I know there are wells out there, and they generally are pretty good on their water supply, but pretty much all groundwater. But getting ahead of it is probably good on all these emergency orders and mandates. It's better to get ahead of it instead of getting drug into problems with the water board. And there are provisions in the governor's executive order for the water board to actually go in and mandate these things if you haven't had it done. So it's better to get ahead of it out there. So, all right. So here's just some, I guess if you can call it some fun stuff that has to do with the drought. And this is what's going on at Lake Mead. Obviously, Lake Mead is severely impacted by the drought. We know when we looked at the drought map earlier, we saw that part of Nevada is really affected by the drought. You can't get much more extreme than they're having there. And as the water levels from Lake Mead lower, we're seeing some interesting things going on out there. Sunken boats, dead bodies. Yes, indeed. There have been dead bodies discovered out there. There was actually just at the end of World War II, there was a B-29 bomber that ditched into Lake Mead. It's at the bottom of the lake, and that's now a lot more accessible to divers now. So we're seeing a lot of interesting things going on, and so it's kind of, I guess you could say it's kind of a fun aspect, but more seriously, they've actually had to go out and put temporary intakes because the lake level has lowered down below their intake. So supplying water to the city of Las Vegas has become a little bit more challenging. So we can just kind of stroll down here. We're looking at it's dropped below 1,050 feet, which is there. That's a pretty critical level. So, and it just continues to drop. So, but we're seeing some interesting things, like people are going around and photographing some of these boats that have sank for one reason or another. They're out there, and then people are doing stupid stuff like getting stuck in the mud and trying to get out and look at these things. And so we can see what the water levels are looking like here. This is the interesting chart here. The water levels are, you can see the highest recorded water level, 1,225.44 feet, and the current water level, 1,049.52 feet. So we've had a really close to 200 feet of drop in water level in the lake. That's a huge amount of water that is not in storage. And it's definitely affecting the city. So there's some quasi fun stuff out there, but certainly it's a serious situation. Doesn't look to get to better, and my guess is we're going to see the water levels drop even farther. So serious stuff. If the lakes, and here's an important point, if the lake's water level is expected to stay below 1,050 feet, where it is right now, by January 2023, that will trigger a Tier 2 shortage, and we'll see Colorado River water supply cut. So that will be, we'll see some pretty severe cuts. Arizona will get cut from the current 18% to 21%, Nevada 7 to 8%, and Mexico will also see a cut in its share of the Colorado River water. So I would expect that to actually be triggered based on our current trends, unless we unexpectedly get some heavy rainfalls, which nothing seems to indicate. Then that's then that's probably what's going to happen. Okay, so there's your drought update. Uh, obviously we got some a lot of issues out there, so we'll continue to monitor the drought and talk about that from time to time. I like to get on here and talk about the news about once a month or so. But it's been a little while since we've talked about it. So next up, PFAS, which is has been cleverly dubbed the forever chemical, but we're starting to see some progress on the front of how to clean that up, which has kind of eluded people up till now, and we're finding PFAS everywhere. It's certainly something that's in a lot of the water news, and people are concerned about it showing up in water systems everywhere. The health effects are pretty well known as well, and it is notoriously difficult to clean up. But we're seeing some progress on that front that we're gonna talk about here. So that's certainly something that we're interested in. Let me bring this up here. Yeah. So before we go into the progress that we made on treatment, I just wanted to note that the EPA is paying attention. So they've added 5 PFAS chemicals now. PFAS is really a whole family of chemicals. So it's not just one thing. It's perfluorinated alkaline compounds, and they're complex chemistry. They're a very tight bond, which is why it's difficult to degrade them. The chemical bond is very, very stable. And in order to break things down, you have to break some pretty stable chemical bonds. That's challenging to do. So we got really 2 things that are going on the PFAS front. One, the EPA is really looking at action levels and screening levels and removal management levels. These aren't cleanup standards, but they give you some guidance in how low do we need to go to get this out of our water. So and so it's you can see here. Here's our they've added 5 PFAS, and we're not these can get very hard to pronounce, but so you can just see here. The first PFAS they added was perfluorobutane sulfonic acid, but there's some other ones here: hexafluoropropylene oxidimer acid. It's just, yeah, these have some long chemical names, and so we just generally group them under the PFAS acronym, and we go from there. But it's something that the EPA is throwing a lot of resources at for their credibility. So so they're looking at now with this announcement, they're looking at regional screening levels, and those are done by EPA regions to identify what is contaminated medium, what needs action now as opposed to what can be deferred. And ultimately what they're going to do is come up with some cleanup levels and some MCLs, but that's going to take some time. You got to look at toxicology, and it just takes some time. The screening, regional screening levels that they're looking at implementing here on an emergency basis will really help provide some guidance until the actual MCLs can be set forth. Now, an MCL is a legally enforceable guideline. Regional screening levels kind of get treated like that, but technically they're not legally enforceable. They're to provide guidance, and so that's what people need right now. They don't know what's safe and what we need to clean up to. So the EPA, to their credit, is taking action on this and moving forward and looking at this, because the more we look for PFAS, the more we find it in different water systems, and it, like I say, it's challenging to get out. We used to worry about PCE and TCE. Those things are a relative picnic to get out of the water as opposed to PFAS. However, there's some good news on the treatment front. So we are looking at a couple papers here. people are looking at, and this is at University of California, Riverside, is looking at using microbes or bacteria to break down uh, the class of PFAS called fluorinated or carb, carboxylic acids. Sorry, I have challenges with that. So it's sometimes you get into these long chemical names and it can be challenging. So anyway, this is a particularly stubborn one, but under anaerobic conditions. So this is non-oxygen conditions. Um, a carbon-carbon double bond is crucial for shattering the ultra-strong carbon-fluorine bond by microbial communities. So instead of attacking the really strong bonds in the PFAS molecule, they're going after a carbon-carbon bond, so a double bonded carbon, which is, while it's still a pretty stable bond, is a lot easier to attack than and break than the carbon fluorine. So it's going to require certain microbes to basically break that bond down, and they're looking at this here at UC Riverside and making some good success. Now keep in mind this is only for the FCAs, so that's basically what they're looking at here. But that's one um, uh, one option. So, and they say that microbes are usually talking about bacteria, capable of doing this type of defluorination are not rare, but it's getting it to work in the proper way and break down those carbon-carbon bonds. So now biocatalysts that can do defluorination of perfluorinated compounds like PFOA, which are very rare. So they're continuing to do research here, but there's some good progress being made, and so on to the next story. This is a different approach using an iodide in conjunction with ultraviolet treatment and sulfide. So it's kind of a combination chemical treatment as opposed to a microbial treatment that we talked about previously. So anyway, they're referencing the Forever Chemicals marketing name. But anyway, adding iodide to a water treatment reactor that uses UV light and sulfide destroys up to 90% of carbon fluorine atoms. That is an incorrect reporting because you're not destroying the atoms. You're destroying the molecules. So that's a little erroneous reporting there. So keep that in mind. You're not destroying atoms. that's a little more challenging to destroy atoms. Anyway, so what they're doing is once again by destroying the molecules, they're breaking down the bonds. So you're doing that with the iodide, and apparently they're getting some energy from the UV light to power the chemical reaction, and so this is actually good news. So we're seeing a couple promising bits of research here, and there's some other ones out here that where we're seeing some promising research on breaking these things down and getting rid of them. So that's actually good news. Now, obviously, this is not something you're going to apply just on a groundwater plume. It's going to be a treatment system for a water system, and so that's probably where those would probably in a lot of cases already have UV treatment systems, or they're easy to apply. And so if you have PFAS, this could be an optional treatment somewhere down the road. It needs to be perfected yet, but that is that at this point. So, all right. So there's kind of where we are at on PFAS. So definitely some good news there, and we're making some progress. But as I say, it's good news, bad news situation because we're continuing to find PFAS out there, and it's showing up in just a lot of water systems. And right now, the treatment technologies is just expensive to treat for, and so it's something that a lot of people are really struggling with. So it's better. Sometimes we can go in and we can modify wells if we're dealing with specific zones, shallower zones where the PFAS is located. We can go in and maybe modify that well and seal those zones off. But if it's widely distributed in the well, then your only option is some kind of treatment. So we're seeing progress in those fronts. All right, so let's look at something else that's in the news a lot. Microplastics are one of those new things out there that we always have to have something new that are showing up. The more we look, the more we're finding these things. So plastics tend not to break down, or they break down a little bit, but they break down to microplastics, which are really nanoparticles of plastic. And we're starting, the more we look for these, this is another thing, the more we find them. So this is kind of disturbing because it's not like it's a particular type of compound you can break down with the chemical bonds. We're now dealing with microplastics, so you can deal with it using reverse osmosis, ultrafiltration to get these things out, but they tend to clog up the screens and require more frequent back flushing. So they're a little bit challenging, and we just don't have a lot of information on them right now. But it's once again, here we are seeing Lagos, Nigeria. We're seeing it showing up in water wells. They're getting most of their water from wells, and it's showing up in their water wells. So that's how it ends up getting there. Getting into wells in that situation is following some kind of pathway, but a lot of we haven't really defined a lot of those things. The whole process, how it breaks down into microplastics, how it moves with the groundwater, and how you actually get, I guess, a plume per se of microplastics. Here we go with there's even microplastics in soil across the Tibetan Plateau. So even in Tibet, we're seeing microplastics showing up. So that's kind of disturbing when you think of it, because when we think of Tibet, we think of this pristine Himalayan environment, and not so. We got microplastics, and so in the soil, and it's contamination introduced by people. So once again, the more we look, the more we find this stuff. What can be done about it? I don't know. These plastics take a long time to break down, and they're microplastics. You can see problems with sea life as they get in salt water and out in the oceans. We can get problems with it clogging gills. So in significant quantities. So this is really an issue. How do we deal with that? It's out there, and we're going to keep finding more of it. All right. So on to some miscellaneous topics here before we wrap up. One thing is that with all the wars going on in the world, we're seeing a ramp up of hacking different systems. So cybersecurity is a big deal. A lot of water systems are vulnerable to being hacked, and this is especially true from smaller water systems that don't have the technology that a lot of bigger water systems have. So it's really a concern out there because, even before the war in Ukraine, and we saw a real ramping up, we were seeing a lot more ransomware attacks and those types of things. And I could just see small water systems being held ransom, and it's something that's definitely of concern. So the EPA, once again, to their credit, is looking at funding to go back and improve the cybersecurity, and this is an important deal. It's not groundwater news per se, but the security of our water is really, really important. And most small water districts like the ones I work with, it's really not something that's at the top of their priority list. And they don't have the technical knowledge in house to deal with that. So, and you go out and hire an outside contractor, and that's going to be expensive. So it kind of gets put on the back burner if they even think about it at all. But it is an issue. Um, whether a ransomware attacker would go after a small water system that doesn't have 2 cents in the bank is I don't know if that would happen or not, but it's certainly just even people script kiddies out there playing around. If they can find a back door and shutting down your valves, we've seen some incidences where people have hacked into some water systems and bumped up chlorine injection levels and things like that. So this can be a significant issue. It may not just be ransomware; it can just be people playing around and hacking in, and it's a lot easier to do than you might think if you have the skill. So a lot of open doors out there. The EPA is looking for money to maybe close some of these doors, and it's something that we really need to get smaller water systems thinking about anyway. And they'll kind of roll their eyes and say, "Oh man, one more thing," but um, but you got to think about it anyway. All right, so um, I like to talk a lot about infrastructure and asset management. And so we're tracking some of the trends. And this article popped up on my radar for me as we kind of wind down here is that even in Canada, where water prices are low, aging infrastructure and rising costs are a problem. So part of the problem might be that the water prices are too low. You don't have a capital improvement program to replace your aging infrastructure. So that kind of jumps out at me right there. And it goes on to talk about things, but um, they're talking about the problem of aging systems adding up, and it's the usual stuff. Is what we're getting is that we're really getting people aren't investing in the systems to keep their assets up to date, and they don't have a capital improvement program. They don't have an asset management program for replacing assets that need to be replaced, and so they push the limits, and then they get breakdowns, and then it becomes more expensive to replace, and so it becomes real challenging, and you don't have the funding to do it. So this is a problem not just in the U.S. but in Canada. Um, so they're talking about some things that are specific to Canada, but the point I really wanted to make with this was that it's not just the U.S., it's Canada, it's elsewhere in the world that is having problems with aging infrastructure. And a lot of water districts like to kick the can down the road and don't like to do the maintenance they need to do to keep things up to date. And then it becomes an intractable problem that you don't have enough money to deal with. It's better to do it slowly and gradually. Put in an asset management plan, put in a capital improvement plan, fund it, and then use that money every year to keep your system up to date. I can't recommend that enough. So, lastly, this was an article that popped up in Water World. I'm not going to play this video here, but I just wanted to point out that there was they ran a survey, and they showed that safe drinking water, removal of lead pipes, and cybersecurity protection issues that I just mentioned earlier are all top issues for voters. I kind of question who they might have polled in this, but safe drinking water certainly. Cybersecurity is probably not something that maybe, but I'd like to see some of the questions that they asked on this, but apparently it is making it on the radar anyway. So cybersecurity is making it on the radar, and that is good because we want to talk about our water systems, not just the big guys, but the smaller guys too, about the cybersecurity and the asset management issues. And removal of lead pipes and safe drinking water, period, is basically boils down to asset management. So there we have it. That is our show for today. Just recapping some of the groundwater news out there. Some of we see some of the same problems out there, but there are some hopeful fronts on the PFAS area. So that's good news. That we may see some treatment technologies that are going to enable water systems to effectively treat for the scourge of PFAS and basically get rid of the name, the forever chemical, that we can get rid of it. So there you go. Microplastics continues to show up. You're probably going to hear about more of that in the news. And then things like asset management and cybersecurity are just ongoing issues that we need to keep talking about and reminding our water systems that they need to do something about that. So, all right. So with that, I just want to remind you I have some upcoming classes, the well health check process for diagnosing well problems. We're going to do that on June 8th. So I will provide more details on that. That's a 1-hour class on diagnosing well problems. We really pack a lot in there to show you how we diagnose problems and then really get at what we need to do to get our well back in shape. And once again, we tie it back to the California permitting process. It's getting harder to get new wells, so you want to take care of your old wells. The well health check process is part of that. If you want a little bit more deeper detail here, we talk about, I got a systematic well management class coming up. This is really looking at the every stage of a well's life cycle. So we want to optimize performance throughout our well's lifespan so we can get the maximum use out of our life for the lowest possible cost. And we have that coming up in July 12th through 14th. This is going to be 2 hours a day for 3 days in a row. So we're going to do it convenient for people in California. We're going to do it from 8 to 10 every day for 3 days in a row. And that's proved to be a successful schedule in the past because water system operators can get their contact hours, take the class, and then get out and still do things during the day. So we found that pretty convenient instead of an all-day class where people's eyes start to glaze over after lunch. And so this kind of keeps it a little bit snappy and still gets them the contact hours. And once again, we pack a lot of information in there. So it's going to be, these are all paid classes, obviously. And you'll get a certificate for your contact hours. All right. So wrapping things up here, you can find us. We stream into the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel and also on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. Please leave comments, chats, likes, shares. I appreciate all that. That helps grow the channel a little bit and gets the word out. And I'm always interested in hearing from folks on what your particular situation is and what topics we can have on the show. So also, if you are interested in being on the show, if you're a water system operator or somebody that provides services to the water industry, then get a hold of me here and I will schedule you up to be on the show. I love to do interviews and talk with people so people don't just have to look at me, listen to me chatting at them for an hour. And that's that. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps. Hit the bell. That'll tell you when I post a new video. We go weekly here. So Groundwater Guy YouTube channel. And on LinkedIn, all our past shows are on the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel. So we got some interesting stuff there. So check that out. And with that, we will see you